Okay. And then I'll have us move forward. So we did kind of already think about, right, why it's so important, like the importance, kind of the need for outreach for undocumented students specifically. But we know that that also comes with its own challenges. So I also want us to kind of take some time to name what those challenges are by sharing it on this Mentimeter right here. You can use the QR code that's here on the screen, or I'll go on your browser and do menti.com with the code that's listed there on the screen that Nancy just threw in the chat. So I'll give folks kind of like a minute to do that, and then I'll go into the Mentimeter actually, so we can see if there's any responses already. But again, the question is just, what are some challenges you face when outreaching specifically to undocumented students? Good, so we're starting to see some responses. Good, okay, I see lack of data available, so hopefully we can give some models for that today. Need for outreach office buy-in, right? Because it shouldn't just be on one person to be doing outreach. Don't want students to feel targeted. Students sometimes feel apprehensive accessing resources. Lack of institutional understanding of the laws. Identifying students that need services. Not enough bilingual staff members. I'll wait for maybe a couple more responses. Let me just close this. Making AB 540 residency information not too intimidating. Lack of liaisons and lack of welcoming language. Administration not understanding that not every undocumented student will self-identify and come to us. Good, okay. It's a really good point. I'm wondering if I could get somebody to either share about something that they wrote here on the Mentimeter, or just want to kind of make any comments at all, right, with what they're seeing on the Mentimeter, anything resonating for folks. I'm very curious about the person who wrote this. Oh, sorry, I think somebody was going to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to say we've been struggling with just trying to get a report that we can use to reach out to students that are eligible for AB 540 but haven't done it yet.
Mm.
And specifically working with our Undocu Center and trying to identify which ones are actually undocumented, is one of the challenges.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Julie, for sharing that. Right. Yeah. Like, because AB 540 is open to not just undocumented students, right? Who are the undocumented folks within that pool, and like, how can folks kind of identify them and reach out to them and connect them to the resources that they need? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to share? I'm kind of curious about this specific point around administration not understanding that not every undocumented student will self-identify and come to us. I'm wondering if anybody wants to share about that, or they resonate with that too.
I can share it. I'm the one who wrote it. So I think I was referring to sometimes administration will showcase like, oh, there's 600 students on our campus who identify as undocumented. Why aren't we outreaching, or why aren't you getting those students to sign up for your program, your center? But really, I don't think that there's that understanding that not every student will self-identify or come to us for those services. So really trying to see, I think that's really a challenge of having administration understand that when requesting these things.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, for sharing that, right? Yeah, like I think I've heard a lot of schools kind of rely right on self-identification for students to like be connected to these resources themselves. But I think, as we all know, as folks who serve undocumented students, there's a lot of like fear, stigma, just misunderstanding around accessing services, or even knowing that those services and resources exist, right, for the community, that there's many reasons why self-identification can only kind of like get us so far in serving these students. So thank you for sharing that. So I'll kind of transition us to the next part, but thank you all for all this you shared, right? I think we're seeing a lot of kind of like need for different outreach techniques and just like need for more institutional buy-in and just need for more support from staff and departments that's not just the undocumented student center to make outreach like possible for our students. And so I'll go back to our slides right here. And this need for proactive outreach for different outreach techniques, right, has been pretty well documented across the field. In 2019, right, we co-authored the California Community College Dreamers Project. And the first challenge that we found through that research is the inadequate ability to outreach to undocumented students and protect student data. And from this report, it found, right, that when undocumented college-ready students are not made aware of resources and support available for them, they don't go to college. They don't enroll because of that high cost, right, of non-resident fees. They have this idea that they cannot pay for college, and there's a lot of like fear and misinformation in accessing college as undocumented folks. And in 2020, the state of undocumented students at California public universities, which is the CSU and UCs, actually found that undocumented students have a hard time finding resources at their campuses, that they're at disadvantage when seeking campus information, resources, and services from staff in those universities, and that 44% of them actually reported getting inaccurate or incorrect information about how to complete a university procedure, which could really impact, right, their enrollment, kind of like how they get, if they get their financial aid, right, how they are integrated into campus. And this report found that students do use the undocumented student services at those campuses, but they kind of have to look for it, right? And even if they do find them, there is some mistakes that happen within their enrollment path that could kind of impact their like college journey and just the resources that they get once in those schools. And so I think there's a lot of like opportunities, right, to kind of use student data to also do proactive outreach to undocumented students. And when we say this, I think I also want to clarify that like proactive outreach is just one way to reach undocumented students, right? There's also the more passive one with signs, social media outreach, website outreach, tabling at different events, right, where we're not trying to identify students. But that can only, again, I think I heard from earlier, get us so far and kind of can make the job a little bit more difficult, right? And so we really need to kind of pair that with this proactive outreach. And the way to do that proactive outreach is through kind of using and protecting student data. Javier will kind of share a little bit how this works in their college, but I do want to share just some grounding about it today. And some potential data points to kind of help identify students exist in multiple places and need to kind of be used together because undocumented students, right, don't exist in just one of these categories. But data points to kind of help identify students include the citizenship status residency questions and college applications, AB 540 affidavits, and California DREAM Act applications. And if you're an institution that does both credit and non-credit classes, also consider looking into the non-credit side of things, right? Because those classes are free, right? And there are undocumented students who begin their college journey in that pathway. And when we talk about using data, right, to do this outreach, it's not necessarily about creating lists, but really leveraging like queries, reports, working with departments to kind of identify and have what you need to reach out to these students. And some of these departments that hold some of these data, right, and would be really great partners with this is things like the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, Financial Aid, and Admissions. And the benefits of using data in this like proactive outreach is both to students and colleges themselves, right? For students, it does kind of help break down that misinformation, stigma, and help understand them that college is possible and there are resources, people out there available for them. and they get connected to the resources earlier so they don't miss out on key steps that's going to affect their enrollment. So they know that they need to complete the AB 540 form, right? That they need that for financial aid, that there's a center that can help with like integration for them in their campus. And it could also grow like the number of undocumented students on your campus, because if you have a non-credit side and non-credit folks who may not be qualified for AB 540 yet, you can proactively reach out to them, let them know about AB 540, let them know that there is a way to move towards that and kind of work through the credit courses, and that there's a way to kind of continue their education, even if they didn't go to high school here in California. And to the institution, I think this can also really help kind of lessen staff load, right? Because it can potentially address some common issues before they happen, help make sure that students need to do this step and this step so they don't come across issues like high non-resident fees, right? Not getting their financial aid. And data really speaks loudly to our institutions and our decision makers. So how can you also use this data to show needs for your program and impact of your program to advocate for growth? At the California community colleges, students do, or AB 540 students do bring in funding to the college through the supplemental funding formula. So this could also be a way to show the possibilities, right, for your college in serving undocumented students, or even show the impact to the college for serving undocumented students. And then I'll quickly pass it over to Nancy to address some of the concerns, right, when it comes to using data, because we know that also comes a lot with it. And how can we address some of those concerns itself?
Yeah, thank you, Madeline, and thank you just for that grounding. I really love that previous slide. You know, oftentimes we think of this as the benefits to the students, but I think when we're talking to the institutions, we need to be able to speak their language too and talk about the benefits to the institution. A lot of times when we're hearing, you know, like we talk to schools, we've talked to a lot of schools, their understanding is using any kind of data for undocumented students is prohibited by law. But in fact, as Madeline's going to be speaking about, showing us later, there are actually laws within FERPA that say that you can use data for legitimate educational purposes. And so, you know, we're not saying like, oh, just go crazy, right, and do anything, but it's not prohibited by law. And there are protections within the law that allow for us to be able to reach out to students to make sure that they get the resources that are necessary. Then there's kind of like this whole don't ask, don't tell policy, right? Kind of like the way that we were seeing before in the military in terms of different areas around gay rights or gay marriage. Don't ask, don't tell, like we don't want to talk about it. Let's just kind of put it over there on the side. And I think when we put that information in that way, we're actually losing out on the power of the students who are actually within our system and the ability to be able to support them more. No one, I think, is really supported by being over here tapada and like, don't ask and don't tell about that. We have undocumented students, but we don't really want to talk about that. Thinking about how can we do that in a way that's protective, that's safe, and that allows us to actually bring students to bring their full selves to the school. Another one is like, oh, you know what? We're really putting students at risk if we do this. I think that right now, when there's no standardized system, when there's not a real true understanding of FERPA and the power of FERPA and the limitations of FERPA, that people are just kind of doing like ad hoc. This school's doing this school's not doing anything, someone's over here. And I think that we're not putting students at risk if we are able to do that with clarity, with protection, and that we are sort of ensuring that those who are actually going to be touching that data is very limited, and that it's not, you know, just for anyone to be able to see. And then this whole idea that students need to self-identify. That's all we really need to do. Like you need to find your way to the undocumented center if there is one. You need to find the liaison on your campus when many people don't have this. So and our students are not willing or able to actually move forward and self-identify. And I think the thing that's also there, like students need to self-identify. Well, then they come to the center, they talk to the liaison, and then they are sort of like named as being an undocumented student, and then we can do outreach to them. Kind of leads into the next point. And the next point is like, we can't have a list. Well, if students self-identify, and that's true, right? We cannot have a list. We don't want to have lists lying around. That's part of the model policies that's there. But if you kind of flip that on its head, if students are self-identifying, then you have a list of the students who self-identified. So how can we do that in a more protective and proactive way with queries and data that doesn't mean that it's just a list of students, and there's actually a way to reach out to the students. And we did this at San Francisco State, where you don't have a list of the students, but you, the undocumented student liaison, come up, or the Dream Resource Center person, or who can say, you come up with the language that you want to have to reach out, and then admissions or the registrar can reach out effectively so that nobody has a list. So I think
Yeah.
these are just important to be considering as you hear the rest of what's going on. We know that these ideas are very prominent, which is why we wanted to sort of just talk about them and debunk some of the ideas that are kind of running the show.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I think this slide, right, and just some of the benefits in the previous slide that we shared about can be really talking points to help kind of gain some of that campus buy-in, or at least open up some of the conversations on your campus onto why there is a need and there is an opportunity in using student data to do that proactive outreach. And we just want to share some of those legal kind of backing that Nancy kind of touched upon in the last slide. But again, right, there is this big part of FERPA that actually talks about that prohibits school basically from disclosing personally identifiable information without consent of that student or the parent if they're underage. And I think this is the part that kind of gets folks is to pause and not do this type of data work and proactive outreach, is that if there is a court order, a subpoena, schools may be required to release that information. But we have seen examples, and we'll share it in the next couple of slides, right, that there is a way to kind of minimize risks like this, and kind of find a way to protect student information, specifically undocumented student information, still to the fullest extent of the law. And some of those examples are included here. Like with CSAC, right, they do technically have a list of undocumented students who apply to the California DREAM Act, but there are still protections to all of those information for folks who apply for the DREAM Act. And I also want to highlight this part in FERPA that actually does say that student information can be disclosed to other school officials for legitimate educational interests, and kind of serving undocumented students, right, and making sure that they understand what's available to them, what they need to do in order to go to college, or resources that's present for them can qualify as those legitimate educational interests. And here specifically in California and our different institutions, there are additional protections to protect the student data, to separate local, state, federal enforcement from school proceedings, to make sure that student data is protected, and basically that we're not putting our students and their families at risk by kind of sharing this information within campus departments and using it to connect students with resources. I'm not going to go directly into each of these, right? But we have the California Values Act and AB 21 here in California that does a lot of those protections. And there's also policies within the UC, CCC, and CSU that also protects our undocumented and immigrant families, students, and staff within the community too. And all of that is actually included in our Protecting Student Data resource. So you can kind of use that to familiarize yourself a little bit more within those protections. And there's actually questions on this resource as well on what to consider on how to implement this policy or recommendation in your campus. And it also gives 5 different ways of how to protect and responsibly use student data within your institution, including just being familiar with these existing guidance and protocols, making sure others are aware, especially if they're handling data, right, are aware and trained on these policies. And kind of publicizing this information so it's clear to your students, your families, your community members, that their data is protected and that their information is protected in the college. And so I think we threw that in the chat for folks to check that out a little bit more. And this was made in collaboration with the National Immigration Legal Center. So there is some legal backing, right, in creation of this document. And so I know that's a lot of information. I want to turn it over to Javier pretty soon to talk a little bit about how this shows up specifically at Valley College. But before that, I'll take a pause and see if there's any questions or concerns or comments that folks kind of want to share before we move forward. Or reflections, reactions to any of the information.
Yeah, like if you're familiar with these, is this something that you've used at your school? I think the thing I like about this resource also, Madeline, is that it doesn't just tell you about, okay, here's FERPA, here's the information from the letter from CDE, here's all these other areas, the model policies, but it actually has reflection questions for you to go through, to talk about with your registrar, with your financial aid person, with admissions, because I think knowledge is power, and being able to recognize that this is not just something I want to do on my campus, but this is something that schools and institutions within California and within the nation have elevated, I think brings more power to the work that we all collectively want to do when we think that it's so pivotal and essential and necessary and critical that we're able to effectively outreach to students. So don't be shy.
If I could have a reflection. As we're going through this, thank you so much, everybody. I'm really thinking about how to translate this for high school counselors as well, because they're struggling so much with this side of things. Speaking that relationship between data protection and student outreach is where high school counselors are at a loss a lot of times that we're speaking with them, and that they're by their districts. Player versus Joe forces that don't ask, don't tell phenomenon that Nancy was talking about. And so that's what this very issue that we're talking about today, it's what's driving that bottleneck effect where only a certain amount of undocumented students even make it to college, to even struggle in college, right? So yes, keeping a lens on how to translate this for high school counselors, a really big thing for us right now.
Yeah, thank you, Gerson, for sharing that too, right? Because we know that's like the pathway, right? Or that high school part of it is like critical to the pathway for folks to get to college. The resource does have model policies also for K through 12 institutions on how to, on like working with data and protecting student information, right? So that might be something to kind of look to in that translation of this too. But we want to kind of hear more about that as well. Nancy?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add before we get to the other questions, just thinking about when we're talking about outreach, I think that right now we're really focusing more on that higher education piece of things, but I think that higher education can also do a lot for those who are applying to your schools to reach out to students before they get there. So while we can continue to work, Gerson, on those very important areas that you're talking about, how can schools, if students have made that step to apply, actually be doing that outreach and saying, here's the protections, here's the opportunities that are available to you, even if they didn't get that at their high school.
Thank you, Nancy. Monica?
Hi, I just wanted to thank Gershon for bringing up how important this information is for high school counselors. Here at Butte, we just had a meeting last week, I think it was, and it was a meeting between our Undocu Center, our outreach, orientation, outreach, our recruiters, A&R. And one of the things that we talked about was doing some type of training for the high school counselors that participate in our Reg to Go programs and that type of thing. And I think we were really focused on like the type of residency information we give out, making sure they understand what AB 540 is, the CATA, and the affidavit itself. But I think this FERPA information would be something really important to include. So thank you, Gershon.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. That's a really great practice, right? How can we also let others who are serving our students in the community, including the high schools, also let them know about these protections? Aldo?
Hi everybody. Actually, I'm gonna be dropping a link in the chat. There's something that Cerritos College does because right, we're talking about protecting student data. we've worked with different colleges, and there's such sweethearts working in amazing departments with student data. And some of y'all tremble when it comes to authority. So a big thing is like, well, what to do if immigration ever comes to your campus? So here's a great flyer that any campus can adopt. So that way everybody knows exactly how to, like, what to do in case immigration does come to campus. So feel free
Thank you
to
all
use
though
that.
for dropping that.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I think without a clear understanding of the law, you might think, oh, if someone comes in, I have to give them the data. And in fact, there's actually protections saying that you should not give them the data unless there's a specific court law. It's not a carte blanche of like, give me the data for everyone. They might come in and be like, I want Nancy's data. And then you need to go through the specific protocols for that to happen. But without that understanding, you might see authority and you're like, oh, I have to give it over. No, more protections and more training can allow us to know how to protect the students that are already on our campus.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And there are also legal services available at all of those public colleges, right? So I think it's also like working with them to kind of develop what this protocol is around requests for immigration information. And I'll take a look at the Cerritos resource that you also shared to see that's a practice we can also kind of uplift. But thank you all for just the questions, reflections. I hope people also have reflections that they're holding on to. But I'll transition us over to our campus highlight and want to give it over to Javier to both quickly introduce himself and also maybe start speaking about how do you use data on your campus to do this proactive research, do this proactive outreach for undocumented students. And I'm really excited to have you here. Valley College was one of my schools when I was going to college. So really excited to see the growth too.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, y'all, for being in the room and for sharing all the cool things. I'm looking at stuff and I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool. Javier Carbajal-Ramos, he, him. I'm a counselor coordinator at Los Angeles Valley College. Been actively growing the program here, services and support network across our campus. I'm the regional rep for Region 7, if that means something to you, which means that I am the name on the list for the Chancellor's Office for Region 7, which is LA County area, some parts of like a little bit of LA County, a little bit of other places, but pretty much LA County. I have a bunch of colegas across the states, so definitely getting to know your region coordinator. If you happen to be the region leader, that would be great. I think there's nine of us, something like that. So again, it is not one individual. We get little things here and there from the Chancellor's Office really quickly, and the intent is to distribute it to individuals. So definitely, if you don't know your region coordinator, or if you are your region coordinator, make sure that we distribute the information and you get the information. I am at a community college. I'm a community college in the San Fernando Valley area, where we name ourselves the Valley, even though we're one of many valleys in California. You're like, oh, San Bernardino Valley College? No, Los Angeles Valley College. And so my campus is about anything from 15,000 students. We used to be about 23, and then after pandemic, we started dropping. But pretty much we are a very diverse community here at Valley. I was undocumented for pretty much my entire undergrad. I was fortunate enough that I received my documentation right before grad school, which kind of helped a little bit. Through Mexico, I was born and raised in Michoacan, La Piedad, Michoacan, Mexico, and arrived in the United States as an 11-year-old, wanting to learn about the Ninja Turtles and the Transformers and all those cool things that I used to saw on TV. Thundercats, if you know Thundercat logo, I still use a Thunder logo. But it becomes one of those of like, having to do the work. I was fortunate enough that I began to do this work in 2000 period. Meeting Marco Antonio Fireball years ago, and rest in power. And as a student, and pretty much being guided into what my work is now. At that time, I was in a club called Students Against Social Injustice, because we could not be the undocumented students support network, because if we were, the campus would have come at us. And so we grew that. I've been doing this work like professionally since 2006, and have been actively been in this particular role at this college since 2019. The benefit to this is obviously that, you know, you get to share stories, you get to hear history. Across of it, I was blessed enough to have known amazing people across the state of California and across pretty much the country doing the amazing work. Getting to meet the original dreamers that walked from Miami-Dade College to Washington, D.C., and seeing their powerful stories. Those are, you know, powerful opportunities for at least being able to share their stories across my challenges. And seeing in reality what can be done. But here at Valley College, we have a Dream Resource Center. I am a counselor coordinator. I am faculty. I'm tenure track. I'm done. I'm on that side of town now. The Dream Resource Center has part-time employees, a full-time office clerk, and support. So we're a team of 4. And I am managed under the Dean of Equity. And we're under student services. So you kind of get an idea of where my structure is. I am in an open setting, as you can kind of see. We're in a large group called the Unity Center that houses our basic needs services, Rainbow Pride Center, and Puentista program. We are one center of 3, which is the Black Scholars, the Umoja, and then our Veterans Resource Center and our Rising Scholars program as well. And then our care program is part of us as well. Our Family Resource Center is part of us as well. It's important to know that because in the conversation of data protection, sometimes you have to rely on your colegas and rely across your communities to pretty much get to the next level. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because I really wanted to make sure that we have a conversation, because in every single one of your colleges is different. I see admissions and records in the room, you know, financial aid also sometimes is very heavily part of the conversation. Academics is part of the conversation as well. Graduation offices is definitely part of the conversation. And as I mentioned in the chat, you know, the outreach office is essential. The first thing that I do at these type of conversations is really, you don't need that much data. You know, you don't need that much information because you need certain things to outreach to the community. Yeah, you do. You do need certain things, but you have to generalize your work as much as possible. And the reason is because everybody needs financial aid. Here at Valley, we say you're going to qualify for financial aid at one point. Let me figure out how you would qualify for financial aid. So by taking a specific viewpoint on what the work is, in reality, you don't need a list of undocumented students to find out who needs financial aid. Your assumption is that they are all in need of financial aid. Whether it be a simple fee waiver, whether it be a complex basic needs services, or whether it be, you know, Fast Forward Dream Act right away. But in the good old state of California, with the California Promise Grant and promises being offered across the entire districts, in reality, you need to know who is a recent high school graduate, who is a GED recipient, and that isn't protected data, and your outreach office can definitely handle that. And so I mentioned that bluntly because a lot of the times we believe that we need to have a list of undocumented student services to offer undocumented student services. And also list of undocumented students to offer undocumented student services. We're not talking about changing residency. We're not talking about we're talking about making sure that individuals are categorized correctly within the admissions to receive the appropriate financial aid. That is out-of-state students, that is adult students, that is special admins, that is a bunch of a different type of population. So you kind of bring it down to what it really is. I tell people when I met Mark Antonio Fireball, the first thing he said to us was, this bill isn't really meant for undocumented students. It was actually meant for athletes to come in from different, you know, that they left the state of California, they came back to the state of California, but we're going to utilize it for everybody. And changing the residency status from in-state tuition to out-of-state tuition for all undocumented students, was actually a necessity for them to be eligible, qualify. So when a student comes to me and says, I'm listed as an out-of-state student, I'm like, that's actually a good thing. We're going to work with that. And again, taking a positive approach to the way individuals are being categorized in order to make sure that they meet certain needs. It wasn't a mistake. It was actually done intentionally. They had to be listed as out of state in order for them to be eligible for AB 540. And then at that time, and then we moved on and got a bunch of new bills. So as mentioned, and as obviously like it is part of it, I'm gonna start dropping some stuff on there. I'm at a community college, so UC Davis, you're awesome. I take students to see you on a regular basis. I'm gonna take students to see you all on the 27th, 26th, 27th, I forgot which. And so definitely this list, if you haven't seen these lists, this is all the laws in the state of California that support undocumented students or provide access for in some form or format to undocumented students. It's important for you to know at least the bills and what the bills are for, because the California Dream Act is the name on the folder, right? I used to tell people it's the name on the folder, but the bills that are a part of that folder are actually the important thing. And the reason I say this is because of AB 21. AB 21 is actually one thing that we use. And then power to Cerritos College for making an amazing infographic. Correction, every district in the state of California was required to establish policy, whether they created an infographic or not, depending on the resource. So for example, in LACCD, we have a long little thing logistically because the whole state of, LACCD is a monster. So we made this big old, not nice looking thing, but we hang it on every single one of the doors. But the chancellor's office required every single one of our districts to come up with a strategy when AB 21 was implemented. It wasn't actually something that we were asked to do. It was actually something that we were required to do. The unfortunate part of it is sometimes the district said, we'll deal with it later. And then they might have just put it on the back burner. And as a result, but you can pretty much go into your board docs or whatever your district uses, search AB 21, and then most likely you'll find some type of procedure, because again, the state of California required us to. And that's when, actually that one, when the data was locked. So here at Valley, when I arrived in 2019, the first thing I said was like, I need to do outreach to students because I'm new. I was new not only to the district, but also to the campus. And we wanted to make sure, thank you, Nancy. We wanted to make sure that we started outreaching, right? And specifically, the first thing I was told is data is protected. Data is protected, data is protected, data is protected. And I said, okay, data is protected, done. I was brand new, so I wasn't gonna push that one right away. But I said, okay, I don't need the data of any undoc student on this campus. I am not looking for the data of any undoc student on this campus. I need the data on all of my out-of-state students that have recent high school graduates from local high schools. And I need to know whether they have units from 0 to 21. That data wasn't, that data was open. And I didn't request it, my dean requested it. They didn't know who Javier was, but they did know who my dean is. I obviously talked to my vice president and my dean prior to doing this, and I requested the data on outreach. Pretty much the entire data California, the entire state of the Valley was, I wanted just to know who the out-of-state students were, and their designation, if they were recent high school graduates. Then I went over to our financial aid office and I said, I need every single applicant for CADA. I need to know whether you guys can send an email for me. I didn't need that data. I need to know whether or not you guys can send me an email. And they sent an email. And the email was, we're open for business, come by. And it gathered, and I made a big deal across the entire campus. Every single one of the offices was contacted in here. And so the EOP&S office, the SSD office, Students with Disabilities office, they all housed the flyer to make sure that everybody knew. I treated it like promise, like most likely your promise programs are across the campus. I treated it like guided pathways, like most likely your guided pathways are across your campus. This wasn't one thing that I was going to offer it to one population. I was going to offer it to every single body, because my recent high school graduate that was a mixed status family needed the information twice as much as my undocumented student. My student under asylum that was applying for FAFSA for the first time needed the information as much as my documented individual. And so in reality, I took a wider approach to the data. Once I was able to get that data, and once I was able to get traction, then, and again, my name started being recognized across the campus. What I did is I then said, I am the liaison on this campus. I am listed for the liaison grant on this campus. I cannot do my job in being the liaison and serving our $187,000 that the state chancellor's office gives me without access to this information. I went up the pipeline and I said, I need my dean to approve this. I need my vice president to approve this. And then once they did, I got both my vice president and my president to do a commercial on how Valley supported undocumented students. And then when they did commercial, I made sure that we were able to talk to the research office right after that. In reality, the research office was doing what the law intended to, protect students. But years ago, I was taught just the letter of law versus the heart of the law. Right? The letter of the law is don't give me that data. The heart of the law is we need to protect the students as much as possible. So I met the protection. Here at Valley, I don't have a list of students on my computer at all. I have a link that is sent to me by my research office. My research office puts together a link. They house the data on their end because in reality, I don't want to house it on this computer. This computer has how many students are eligible for my book grants. This computer has how many students have seen me in my counseling appointments. But again, that's a wide range of students and really no demographic information. My information on the computer is as coded as I need it to be. CADA versus the California Dream Act, eligible for California Promise Grant, those type of things. So what I did is I removed the undocumented students part of the Undocumented Student Success Center within my computer and within my data. And what I said is I need out-of-state students eligible for internal financial aid to receive the financial aid that they need. Why? Because if my computer is overseas in any of the requirement, and then they're going to find exactly the same type of data that they would find at the admissions office, at the financial aid office, at the academic research office. In reality, the fear of FERPA at most colleges is a fear of not protecting the students' data for any particular reason. But in reality, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that those individuals that need the support services, that they get it. So for us, it becomes I needed to go to my vice president and my president and my director of data to pretty much understand what we were doing. And we do not email, hey, undocumented student, come to the Undocumented Student Center for undocumented student support. It doesn't work that way, right? When I was undocumented, when I was in college, the first thing that my mom would have said is delete that email. And so again, that particular conversation is we try to get it as generic as possible. Hey, it looks like there's something aspects of residency that might support it. We know that you graduated from Grant High School 2 doors down. Come by, bring your high school transcripts, and we would love to help you out. And again, handing out that research, becoming that tío, that tía here on the campus that really gives them that additional support for the first gen students and reaching out in that format and not as the Undocumented Student Center. Once they're here, then they're in the Undocumented Student Center, right? The butterflies fly with pride here. Literally, we have our pride flag right next to our butterfly flag outside, right outside our center. But in essence, the research office worked with me. And so I wanted to stop here and ask you a question. And the primary question that we have is whether or not your research office has buy-in. And then so if yours does, then you can say that on the chat. Yes, my research office has buy-in. No, they're asking me questions. If you feel comfortable with what type of questions are being asked, feel free to chat it on there.
Yeah, thank you, Javier, for sharing all of that, right? I think I also am really impressed with just the type of like work that's been built in Valley since I've been there. But as folks are kind of thinking about that specific question, right? Do you have buy-in from your research office? I just want to really highlight some of the points you made around not needing like all of the data, right, for undocumented students and actually being really strategic about what points you're asking for, what data points you're asking for, and from who. And how do you kind of like gather that information to and like use the different departments to do the outreach for you. And kind of bring students into the campus with that specific messaging you said, right? That might not necessarily out them as undocumented students, but kind of bring them in and then let them know, right, about the undocumented student services on your campus. I think this is a really like strategic way of like bringing folks in too. And I just really like the points you made around, the protections that exist like through FERPA, through the state, through a different, through the systems, right? And the ways that you all also take to make sure that that information is protected within the equipment that you use on your campus too. So just want to highlight that. And yeah, and I'll see if anybody, Javier also shared a lot of stuff, but if there's anyone who wants to kind of talk about the research question that he asked. And so I think there's a response here from Butte College. They don't have buy-in from the research. They mostly talk to their IT department and CCC apply information. And Monica is from A&R.
Thank you very much, Monica. And again, A&R is a humongous, especially because CCC Apply has everything you need, or the CCC application system has everything you need. I am on the proponent of the whole CADA with AB 540, the new bill that passed. I am pushing that this campus to eliminate that additional stamp and encouraging students to apply for financial aid instead of having them do one additional form. I know within our own community that is kind of a mixed pool right now because some people were like, well, no, but what if they don't apply for financial aid? Or what if they don't do this? What if they don't do that? But I'll put another drop in there. If you haven't been made aware, our sisters and brothers across the K-12 system has been charged with certain things. The All In campaign at the high schools where they actually get money to help students apply for financial aid. And so in reality, that system already began. It's actually about 2 or 3 years old. I forget how long it is, but AB 540 invention in CADA is actually late in my book. And so the All In campaign at the high schools would help us out significantly because then would be able to then just continue. If you haven't been made aware, in admissions, CCC Apply, and I know AR people can attest to this, is we have significantly more applicants than we do have registries. And if you take the data from financial aid of how many people submit the financial aid application, it actually goes up as well. Why? Because they do this in October, they do this in December, before life starts kicking them in the butt, right? Before they start doing those things that in reality makes them realize that they happen to be undocumented, or just life becomes. I tell people from October to August, it's a very big part of the year with a lot of things happening with families. And so A&R is a big proponent here at Valley, or Admissions of Records, CCC Apply. They feed me as much as I possibly need. The one thing that I ask them is, so I meet with them on a regular basis, at least once a semester, and we go through all of the error messages. And so all of the students that fell into the error message, and I don't get that data. I support Admissions and Records to understand what error messages might not be error messages. So for example, here at Valley, we have a large Russian, Armenian, Jewish community that wouldn't disclose that they're undocumented, but they would disclose to us that their visas have been expired for 10, 15 years. And they'll let us know. So they'll go into an error message and, we need evidence of that visa being expired. That's an undocumented person. And so for us, it becomes that I actually had to go to admissions and records and say, did you know they're undocumented as well? It's like, no, they had a visa. Yeah, let me explain to you this part. And again, bringing my legal resources across the state of California and across the support, we were able to say, well, they're undocumented too, and they're part of the Dream Center. The same thing goes for asylum applicants, not specifically asylum grantees. And not forgetting our TPSs, our U visa students, all of those residency determinations. And so what I usually do to my colegas across the county or across the districts are definitely get your hands on the residency determination manual that is put together by the Chancellor's Office at every one of our sectors. Those manuals are key to understand what your students are being coded as, because those manuals are the ones that are being reported. If you understand the language that is being reported to the Chancellor's Office, you can also understand which ones you want to look for. And so again, asylum applicants versus asylum grantees, they are different. They do have different identities, right? And so, you know, you run into this many times of, I think somebody had a comment. Did somebody have a question or comment?
No, I think Nancy also just threw a couple links in the chat around AB 469, right? That we also have to support high schools and kind of helping implement that a little bit more. And I think she was also just affirming your point, right? On like doing this data work can also help like support other departments and kind of bring that additional context in undocumented student identities. That's really useful for them to like kind of properly like code students, right? And ensure that they're being coded as AB 540 appropriately within their campus. So I
The
really
other aspect,
yeah.
and thank you. And so the other aspect is who's being referred to you, right? Who's being referred to you? Because that asylum applicant might not be referred to you because they have a work permit and a social security number. And according to admissions and records, they have an asylum applicant. Or that out-of-state tuition for 1 year that, depending on your district, if they have access to the out-of-state tuition for over a year, fee reducing waiver, those being referred to you. And in reality, that's a data set that you can gather without having to request it. You can say, I want to make sure that I am giving all of the students that have submitted the non-residency fee waiver from $300 a unit to $46 a unit. And once you get past the, no, you can't have that data, then there's a lot of different types of information that you can gather. Who is undocumented, as you all know, is you'll get a very wide range of numbers. But who is an asylum applicant, you'll get a very specific number. Who is a U visa student, you'll get a very specific number. These are numbers similar to AP 540. These are numbers similar to data. And again, protecting that data pretty much is how you've set it up. So like I mentioned, no data sits on my computer. I have links to a file that is held at the research office. I am the Undocumented Student Center. And so in reality, this is a brave space. This is not a safe space. I don't create safe spaces on our campus. I create brave spaces on our campus because we have AB 21 because we need AB 21. And in reality, it is that. This is an opportunity for you to also be brave in the aspects of it that, yes, somebody can come to your campus, which they haven't in a couple of years. Just a fear-mongering thing that was put into place by Trompudo. And so in that sense, it becomes one of the protective classes that we protected. Currently, I'm trying to get work with my Rainbow Pride Center to gather my undocu queer students and provide resources to them, different resources that they already need. But my undocu queer identities are now protected. And in reality, the only reason they're protected is because that committee hasn't met to provide us access to them. That is literally the only reason. And so
Thank you, Javier. I know that you probably can like speak a lot more on this and just give a whole dive a little bit more, right? But I'm also excited that you're sharing a lot of just like different opportunities you're also thinking about serving the intersections within the undocumented identity, and even just highlighting, right? Like knowing what kind of data points you're looking for and kind of making friends with admissions also is really helpful to just kind of limit and also protect the kind of data that you're holding as the undocumented student liaison on your campus. And so I actually want to take a pause here and just open it up for other folks, right? To see if there's any questions, comments that people kind of have, or just resonance, right? Ideas that this is coming up, that's coming up for you, as Javier has kind of just shared, you know, the different very strategic ways that they use and kind of really utilize and data to serve their undocumented students on their campus. But I'll open it up to see if there's any comments, questions, reflections. Chat is welcome too if you want to type it. No question. And I think people are really marinating on the information, which is great. And so I think maybe we can have Javier just share really quickly, just like because you shared a lot of things, right? And folks may not be at the level at LAVC where they have the campus buy-in, they know what data they need, they have relationships with these different departments, but maybe just one piece briefly of short advice that people can take if they're really interested in starting to use data in this way to serve their undocumented students.
And kind of how to approach, I just add on to that, Madeline, how to approach those kinds of relationships if you're not at that level yet where you can talk to your dean or talk to your admissions people in the way that you've been able to navigate, Javier.
Yeah, I mean, the easy one that I would definitely give advice, and without having to get data, is go talk to the EOP office director, go talk to SSD directors, Office of Student Life, start getting the buy-in from the individuals that may be at your reach. So for example, here at Valley, I went and made sure that associated students understood the complexities of the ID Verify system, right? And so having them understand the complexities of what students might go to, that will then start traveling through a different format to those heads that you might need to be in a little bit of different mindset in the future. And so I did go to my union and I spoke about the complexities of teaching undocumented students. I did go to my students with support services like EOP, and I talked to them about what did they needed to support undocumented students. Once they got to a point where they needed support when it came to data, then I was in a place to be able to then ask my vice president and my dean for that support. And it really wasn't me asking the information. It was the EOPNS office director asking the information. It was the counseling office asking for direction. Because I needed to know how many AB 540 students received associate's degrees for transfer, right? Because again, the funding formula. So I started really at a ground level and made sure that I trained my outreach staff on how to look at our own website and support students through our own website. Not because I needed them to look at our website, but in reality, because I needed our website to be a little bit more friendly towards undocumented students. And as a result, that's going to get up to the admissions and records. That's going to get up to the deans that support that research. And so again, I needed to put it in the heart and minds of these. I tell my colleagues that, you can do a lot of work without any piece of data, and you do it already. You go in table and you hand out an amazing flyer that reaches more than one person. Now the conversation is, can you do the same thing with your internal departments? Do an internal outreach. Internal outreach is more important. Have you thought about going to the librarians and making sure that the reference desk has all your information? Because did you know that libraries are public sectors, that anybody in the community can come and use them? go to them, make sure that they have the resources that they need, because an elementary school student's going there. And a mom that needs additional support and additional study hours is going to there. So in reality, those are the buy-in aspects of it. And yes, it plays to speak to your unions and your groups, that classified staff, classified senates, associated students, doing that legwork there, because at one point it won't be your voice asking for that data. It would be the voice of the campus asking for the data. Dream Resource Centers are not meant to support undocumented students. Dream Resource Centers are meant to support the campus to then serve undocumented students. So in reality, your work is to how to fix your campus.
Wow.
We can't fix everything.
Mhm.
The employment thing, the UC system tried it, and students are hungry. But there are things that we can actually affect. So
Yeah.
definitely go to those smaller groups and start doing the legwork there. Don't just sit at a table. Don't just do the outreach aspect of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Javier. I think that I have not heard kind of building cross-departmental and activating allies on campus put in that really eloquent and just kind of like inspiring way. So thank you, I think, for even putting it in that way, and even kind of like, you know, shifting the mindset that like we're not just here to like serve, like Dream Resource Centers are not the ones necessarily to serve students, but it's supposed to help the campus serve the student. So I think it really also puts the responsibility of that service, right, institutionally, and not just on you or not just on the center that you're working with. So I really love that. And just want to thank you for everything that you shared, and like the strategies really that you kind of put in people's minds, ideas you put in people's minds. I know like folks here should be reaching out to Javier to kind of learn a little bit more. I know there's a lot of technical things to kind of share around that, including specific data points, but I really want to appreciate you and are really grateful for just what you shared to kind of make data and using data a little bit more approachable for the folks here in the room, including myself. And thank you for putting your email in the chat. I'll ask folks to also do some appreciations, affirmations of Javier through Zoom if they're able to, or through the chat. And I'll give it maybe a minute before I do want to present like a couple of kind of closing questions for people to think about. We were going to do this in breakout rooms, but I think just given the timing, I'm wondering if I can maybe get one person or two people to kind of share an answer to any of the questions here on the screen around who's not Javier, right? Because we heard enough from him. We heard a lot from him. But if folks kind of want to share anything new that they learned from this space, right? What are some challenges potentially on their campus, or what are some opportunities that they're thinking about now? And if there's anything they can take back from this space to your campus or organization. But I'm wondering if anybody can share on that point, on those points. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of like ideas marinating, lots of affirmations for you in the chat, Javier. But is there anybody who wants to share around this? Ideas they're like really interested in exploring after, people they want to talk to.
I know for me, just making those connections across other campus departments is really important. And kind of collaborating with our EOPS program and doing presentations, or like, especially because AB 540 students are eligible for their program, making sure that they know that we can serve students. And again, making it an institution of responsibility, not just like our department is the one and the only one doing the things, but it's everybody across campus. They have some basic knowledge. But I'm trying to work on that, and that's currently where I'm at, which is kind of like spreading the love and spreading the responsibility across the institution.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. Yeah, I think it starts with there, right? To how do you activate the other allies on campus? Yeah, DRC pop-ups across the campus is a really great idea. Yeah, for folks to meet you all and for staff members to meet you all. Maybe one more person on just what they're taking from the space, ideas they want to explore. throw it in the chat also.
Well, I think I can say for me that it's the realization that most of our, I mean, we could get audited, right?
Mhm.
I just lost my thought. But the thought of language, right? So
Mhm.
here at Skyline, it was the Dream Center, and that was pretty neutral, right? Now all three campuses are the undocumented community center. So that word undocumented right there already is going to set up red flags to most students that don't want to be identified. Because I just finished my thesis on undocumented students,
Mhm.
and that was one of the areas that I mentioned, right? Language. So Dream Center to me was better than, or at least safer, let's put it that way, than undocumented. Because just saying that, like saying illegal, like that already throws up red flags to a student population that does not want to be identified because they don't know the consequences of what, you know, their actions of going to the undocumented center might set off. So
No,
yeah,
yeah, thank you for
thank you.
sharing that. And I think that's very valid, right, Guillermo? But I think I really like what Javier had pointed out recently, right? That there are just certain populations, right, within the undocumented identity who will never really identify as undocumented, will not use that word, right, and everything. And that's okay, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get the services they need. And how can we call them in with language that's more comfortable to them, but then kind of do some of that education, including like political education, right? That can help them also feel empowered with being undocumented, because there's the journey, right, with being undocumented for undocumented folks, and like helping students also understand that, I think is a service or just a way that undocumented student centers really can help students like feel belonging in that campus as well. But I think even like knowing your community and knowing what language resonates with them is a really great point. Yeah, so thank you for that. And so, Nancy?
Can I jump in quick? Yeah, I just really wanted to thank you, Javier. Just a lot of the points, the framing, the way you put that out there, and just thinking about that when we're saying less that we want to make sure that we're reaching all undocumented students. I think we really want to make sure that the laws are realized in California, realizing the promise of AB 540, realizing the promise of the California Dream Act, the way that it is right now. I mean, never even mind this year, half of the students who are eligible for the California Dream Act are not even applying, never mind whether they're getting the aid or not, right? Or we just published that AB 540 FAQ because a lot of students might be putting out the, like they might be meeting the eligibility, but not know. How can we frame that in a way of, we want to realize, and we want to realize the promise, and we want to show compliance with the law, because everybody who has eligibility for these laws should be able to actually effectively access them. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break that barrier to make sure that students can. So thank you so much for your work in the framing.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for that reflection. And I also just want to uplift the other comment in the chat here about using libraries, right, as public spaces to spread information, because libraries are great in general, but they can even be another opportunity, right, to inform our undocumented folks. And even just the concept, I think, related to what I was mentioning of like brave space, it's very hard to be brave as an undocumented person, and how can the undocumented student services kind of cultivate some of that as you bring folks along in, right? And so just want to uplift that too. And want to give one last affirmation and gratitude to Javier for sharing all that he did. We're probably going to reach out to you to capture some of this in a best practices, promising practices document as we work through that in the next year. And I'm going to wrap us up with just some of our final announcements as we get closer to 11 a.m. now. I know there's a couple more comments in the chat. Let me take a quick look at that. Okay, I'll address that afterwards, but just want to give some final, I guess, promotion again to our Undocu Digest. If you don't get this yet, this is a way to keep updated with our different resources and events coming up. I send this out every second and fourth Monday of each month, and you can be added to the listserv by emailing me at this email right here, and just making sure that you have me as a contact, because this goes out through MailChimp and it might get caught up on your spam, but just add me as your contact and that should kind of take care of it. And then just want to give some contact information for us in the team here. For Javier, we also have Messier, who supports our higher ed team in this space with us. Again, if you need any support, anything that any like promising practices you also really want to uplift in this space. We want to hear about it. We have a lot of great things planned for the next year. So please reach out. And then I think I'll just do one last reminder about our evaluation. Help us kind of learn a little bit more about what exists out there and how to best support you in this space by completing this. And thank you all for joining us for our last one today. We're really excited to see you all soon in the next semester. And thank you again, Javier, for sharing everything that you did today. I'll let everybody go. Have a good rest of your day.